I'm not a doctor and I knew I was going to do interviews with a lot of different people and we wanted to simplify. So the first part, I just wanted it to be this kind of overall who, what, where, when discussion about like the facts, some of the fears that we all have. And then I really believe there are gifts of menopause. I don't think we would be sitting here talking or have met each other had not been for menopause. And that's kind of a really cool thing to think about and say what your doctor doesn't know, because I think that's the section, that's where we go next, right? We go to the doctor and then the doctor might not, might give you a shrug or make you feel like there's something actually wrong with you that, isn't outside of menopause or perimenopause. So it was important for me to just kind of get through the bare bones so you can kind of say like, hey, this is me, or hey, I'm not there yet. But hopefully it's this is me and here's what I get to do next.
Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. We are so excited to welcome back a friend of the podcast. Hello, Tamsen Fadal. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you? Nice to see you both.
It's been a few months now since we've seen you. We saw you when the M Factor launched, and we had a great
Yep.
time watching the documentary and doing a panel discussion with you. But little did people know that at the same time you were working on the M Factor, you were also writing a book. So my first
Yeah.
question is, are you insane? Like, how did you manage to do
Yes.
both of those
My
things at the
husband would
same
answer that
time?
with a resounding yes.
Why did you feel like it was important to get both the documentary last year and the book out now, pretty much at the same time?
Yeah, I didn't even know it was going to all happen at the same time, honestly. We started the documentary almost 3 years ago. It was like 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And the book, I guess, was a little bit after that, but I didn't know it was all going to sort of hit at the same time. I wanted it to all come together and it didn't. So it was a few months apart. I think what was important for me, though, is because I had so many interviews and I couldn't do all that in an hour film. And so I realized, like, wow, we have a lot of things to cover, not just what happens in the doctor's office, but outside of it. So I wanted the book to be able to address those because there's a lot of things that happen during this time. Perimenopause, menopause. It's not just hormones. It's not just, nutrition, not just strength training. There's relationships, there's mindset, there's sleep, there's, our brain health, there's, motivation, workplace. So I wanted to address some of the things that also happen outside of the doctor's office and, in our lives.
Right. So her book title is How to Menopause, Take Charge of Your Health, Reclaim Your Life, and Feel Even Better Than Before. And you divided that into 5 different parts, which I really like. I really like that, first of all. And second of
Thank
all,
you.
I
Thank
love,
you.
yeah, the sections. Like in each section, you have boxed parts in the book that just give you great tips. And at the end of the book, just a whole list of resources, just everything that you can do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I would really love to get started, just talking a little bit about the different parts and how you decided what was important to include. So the first part is everything you need to know, which we're not going to be able to include everything you need to know about perimenopause and
That's why it's in
menopause
the
right now.
book.
That's why it's in the book, but it really,
Exactly.
yes, it really touches on there's, we're in this little space where we know each other and we have been in the space for long enough,
Mhm.
but I'm still shocked, but I shouldn't be, by the number of people that don't know about this. So
Me
can you
too.
share the key things that you think are so important?
Yeah, I think as a journalist for a long time, so everything always came like in bullet points, or actionable items. That's how I used to memorize scripts. You'd get on the set, and if there was like breaking news, that you'd write 5 words down the page, and then you'd kind of know to talk off each one. And so that's I think how my head worked in the book. I said it has to be organized because we're in women. I would assume I was picturing who was going to read this. Maybe didn't get a lot of sleep. Maybe they were having brain fog. Maybe they had, 1,000 things going on, dealing with their parents, dealing with kids. And I thought I wanted to be structured where it's easy to read, and just not complicated. And because I'm not a doctor and I knew I was going to do interviews with a lot of different people and we wanted to simplify. So the first part, I just wanted it to be this kind of overall who, what, where, when discussion about like the facts, some of the fears that we all have. And then I really believe there are gifts of menopause. I don't think we would be sitting here talking or have met each other had not been for menopause. And that's kind of a really cool thing to think about and say. And then the symptoms, because I think that's where we all get very confused. Like, oh, I had no idea it was my hair loss was coming from this, or I didn't know that itchy ears were a sign of menopause, dental problems. And then And then the third part of that was, what your doctor doesn't know, because I think that's the section, that's where we go next, right? We go to the doctor, and then the doctor might not, might give you a shrug or make you feel like there's something actually wrong with you that, isn't outside of menopause or perimenopause. So it was important for me to just kind of get through the bare bones so you can kind of say like, hey, this is me, or hey, I'm not there yet. But hopefully it's this is me, and here's what I get to do next.
Right. And to hear from somebody else that's experienced it,
Totally.
right. It's so important. They
Right.
don't
And
feel alone.
I think, one thing that I really appreciate in the book is it's coming from a perspective that's not a medical perspective because,
Thank you.
there are some incredible menopause experts that have written
Yeah,
books and
for sure.
information is great in there. But in your book, it's like, well, this is what happened to me. And this is how I handle it. And as a journalist, I know how to research. So I did the research so you don't have to. And I
Thank
think that
you.
comes through really well in the book. And there are things where very simple things like when you talk about the difference between bioidentical and synthetic, FDA approved versus compounded, we still, so many listeners are like, I don't know the difference when they tell me that it's compounded. Is it
Right.
that mean it's good? Is it synthetic? That means it's fake. So can we talk a little bit about the difference between a bioidentical hormone
Mhm.
therapy and a synthetic hormone?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important too, because I do think that there is such a confusion about a lot of different things. I mean, like, first of all, we'll talk about how hormone therapy has changed since the early 90s when we talk about the study we were all, learned about, and the WHI study. So, the bioidentical are really the ones that you basically know that are out there. They're the estradiol, they've got all different brand names, and the progesterone that we all see with the little white pill. And the transdermal patch is bioidentical too. And so I think what gets people very confused and got me really confused was the fact that I thought like, oh, one of them is plant-based and that's going to be healthier for me. And the other one is like, that's going to be dangerous. And that's not what we're talking about here. So I wanted people to understand the difference between those things and the difference of what we were looking at back in the night before the 90s and in the 90s when we were looking at a different type of hormone therapy that was tested, because I think that was the most important thing for me to also get across. We get super confused. And then you add compounded on top of that. Most people don't realize that, you can't just go in and say, I need some testosterone, because we don't have it for us as women. We have men's, and then we have to get that compounded. So it's a dose that is just for us. And I had this conversation last night. I was out with a girlfriend, and she said, I had no idea. She goes, the testosterone she's doing goes under her tongue. And if she does too much of it, she knows the difference if she does too much or not. And I went, oh my gosh, there's so many different things out there that we're just not aware of. And so it was important for me to know the difference between the synthetic, with the bioidentical, and compound. And compound, I think, gets a lot of people kind of tripped up of what exactly it is, and why some things are compounded versus some things do not need to be.
Yeah, it's something that you added to in there that I appreciate personally because I didn't know about this until we had conversations with clinicians was pellets. And you
Hmm.
leave it in there. You put it in there, but you also say, look, a lot of
Yeah.
doctors don't recommend this
Yeah.
and the dangers that can be involved with pellets. So that is another thing when it comes to testosterone, which I adore,
Yeah.
but it,
I
it is, I
know.
know. And you include in there, and that is a whole thing that listeners that you're going to have to really read
Hmm.
about testosterone and why it's not
And
FDA
the
approved for
pushback
women
and
and the pushback and everything like that and the hoops we have to jump through and the expense that we have
And
to pay.
prescribed off label. Yeah.
Right,
I had to
right.
address that. And it's funny, like every time there was a new study or something came out, I was calling my publisher. I'm like, I have to add this because there's just been so much stuff. And they're like, no more. There's no
they're
more being
cutting
added.
you off.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
was cut off several times, but I wanted to just get in those basics because I think that there's so much confusion, and there's not like, just basic things like, is gel better than cream or injection there's so many different options out there, and there's no one saying like, how do we do this? Just tell me what to do. And I feel
Right.
like at this stage, that's how I felt. I felt like somebody just tell me what to do. And I don't want to tell anybody what to do, but I wanted to lay out some of those options so you can kind of see what experts that we know recommend or not, or the pros and cons, and you can judge for yourself too. I mean, we're smart women, and quite frankly, a lot of us are very, very educated about menopause and could probably teach a lot of the experts about it at this point. And so I think that I have found this group of doctors that has been incredible. They've given me like a master's degree in menopause. And so I do feel like, I could really walk into the doctors that gave me my initial diagnosis and be like, let me tell you what's going on with my body. So I think that's what I wanted women to be able to have.
Right.
Absolutely. Options. We're very smart.
Options,
Give us options and
information.
we can figure it out what's best
Yes.
for us. And I
Yes.
think, they don't, a lot of women are so afraid to even bring up the idea of menopause. And
Sure.
another thing I really appreciate in your book is how you talked about the fears and the big feelings menopause can trigger. Because,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this in the past about the M factor, how you were in the media and starting a conversation about menopause and its effects kind of triggers the age, conversation. So,
Yeah.
why did you feel it important to add that part of the feelings women get, like we're feeling irrelevant or invisible? Why did you? Because I really like that you did. Most books don't even touch on that
Thank
emotional
you.
aspect of menopause.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I was a little nervous about it because I thought, am I going too far off the road of the facts and everything? And then I said, I can't not do it because it consumed me for a really, really long time and still does sometimes. I do have a lot of those fears. And then I also see where there are gifts. But, during this time, it was this kind of, am I being put to the side? Am I, not relevant anymore? Am I kind of invisible? A lot of the symptoms wrapped me up in shame because I didn't even know they were symptoms of this. And so I think it's really important that we talk about those out in the open. And then we also look at examples of women that have gone, no, I'm not invisible. I'm anything but. But those are real feelings and real emotions and real things that, outwardly we try not to show and outwardly we try to be bold and brave. But inside we have that feeling like, am I enough? Or is this it? Or is that all I've got? Or am I still relevant? I had that all the time, and especially in television, where it was a world of being energetic and youthful and trying not to show your age and making sure that there was this filter over everything. So when I took that filter off, I was like, wow, this feels great and scary, but great. And so I understand there's two sides to it. And I felt like it was important to address because I read all those messages that I get, as many as I can, and respond to them. And that is an overriding theme all the time, over and over again. And so I guess I wanted women, if they read this, to be able to talk to somebody else about it, or I don't know. It was just really important not to leave out because I don't think you can separate those things.
No,
I
it
completely
is so
agree.
hard. Right, right. It's so hard. And when you feel alone, it is such a just a scary space when
Yeah.
you start to read and you find out that somebody that's on TV feels the same way, is having the same issues. You feel like, oh my gosh, I am not the only one, and somebody else
Mm-mm.
feels this way. And you also talk a lot about it, just hits so many great points that women that are in this stage of life we don't even think about or attribute things to menopause. You talk about your lifestyle, which you've also touched on. You've talked about movement, the importance of movement, but it's also not to fit into the stress, or you talked about how you were in the 80s and 90s and how
Yes.
that's changed too. And we all, I think we all were.
I
I
think we all
remember
relate
those.
to that.
I'm like, putting on
Yeah.
tights with a leotard. How did I exercise in tights with a
With
leotard?
layers and things off my
Yes.
shoulder. I'd have fainted today. I'd be like,
I know.
I'd have sweated before I got to the gym.
Right. But you also, just talked about the different changes. Can you touch on some of those changes that are important now in our lifestyle?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I came from the Gen X of like less calories in, less fat in. We didn't even talk about sugar or protein or any of that kind of stuff. Protein was like for guys. I remember that. Like, oh, you don't want to have too much protein. I remember those words. And then I remember going to the gym and being like, I'm gonna get on the treadmill and I'm gonna sweat out all my calories underneath underneath the whatever, it's a Stairmaster, and make sure that I'm good and sweaty. And I never went, there was like the guys' weight room back there where it was all like the black mats and the mirrors and it smelled like sweat and the metal bar. And I was like, what's going on back there? So my world has changed quite a bit, and I'm excited because I feel like a lot of other women are hearing that. So I go into the men's weight room now, in quotes, and it's all women, and I'm like, this is so great. This is the greatest thing. So my workout's kind of flipped on its head in terms of how I do things. weights and strength training 100%, trying to use my own body weight with certain things, whether it's the bands or, or if even smaller weights. That's a big deal to me. Walking, like, I don't know, back in the day, it was like, "Oh, walking is an exercise." Well, it is in a big way. And so I do that all the time. And then I think with regard to lifestyle changes of clothes and makeup and all that stuff, I tried to simplify a little bit in that world, and not because I can't wear something, but just because I feel like I just want it to be a little simpler these days. I want the granimals in my clothes. I want my stuff to go together. I don't want like 1,000 things that I'm rifling through that don't fit anymore. So I put like, well, on the days I feel like crap, I put that stuff in the front of the closet, and the days I feel great, that's, I can wear the other stuff. So I just, I don't know. That's kind of how my lifestyle has changed. And I interviewed a lot of people for this, and asked for a lot of help with it in terms of people's stories, and just wanted to make sure that I think that we all felt the same way, kind of. And then also make sure that I put stories in there of people that had a kind of cool advice or things to give. People are fascinating. So I've always loved doing interviews because I think people are fascinating and we can always learn from them.
And their stories, although very unique, have some
Yeah.
undertones of connection. There's certain
Yes.
things we can all relate to. And I think as we get older, we relate even more so. But again,
Yes.
women are afraid to talk about it until someone else stands up and says, Halle Berry,
Yeah.
I'm in
Me too.
menopause.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And you also talk about the Mediterranean diet and
Yeah.
healthy eating. Um, and it was interesting because you mentioned fats. You put fats that harm, fats that
Sure.
heal. And then others was everything that was my favorite cookies, cakes.
Yeah.
I was like, of course, the others would be Colleen's diet.
Yes,
Um,
of course, of course. But I
so
love them too. So,
Yeah.
I know it's so hard. But again, I think as we get older, moderation, we
yeah,
understand that we,
yeah.
we are at an age where we don't want to be deprived. It's not about
Mm.
deprivation, it's about
No,
health.
and it doesn't work. The deprivation part doesn't work because eventually you're like, okay, I'm done with that. And now I'm going to get to make up for all of that deprivation that I did. So it doesn't work like that. And I went through my own eating issues when I was, 20, 24, 25, 26 years old. And, part of it was probably the career path I chose. Part of it was, just years of it was a cheerleader first, and then I was a news anchor. It was like everything was very forward facing, and in skinny equaled success to me. Do you know what I mean? It was just very, so I had gone through my own struggles with that. And I've come to a really great place with regard to nutrition and eating and not depriving myself to feeling like that's where my power lies. And it feels really good. I can kind of enjoy my life at the same time and not feel, um, like I'm not getting to do what everybody else gets, to take part in the world. And eating's a huge part of it, it is. And it's something that I've had to learn. I've had to teach myself and learn and focus on. And then I went back to school to get a coaching degree. With the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which was really cool because I knew a lot of the things, but then I got to like really understand different thoughts about what nutrition is, and that primary nutrition really isn't food. It's really everything else in your life and all those lifestyles. So there was just some really cool things that I've been able to do. So I don't have that food war as good, bad all the time.
Right. So many, oh, I feel like every woman has that food war, like you said, what is good
Totally.
is bad.
Totally.
Yeah. Another thing that I really appreciate in your book is you talk about sex and you talk about what happened, with you in your life, and you went through a divorce. So many women go through these life changes,
Yeah.
not just lifestyle, but life changes. And you talk about you really are upfront, honest, includes so much in there that
Thank you.
women are scared to
Much to my
ask.
husband's, much to my husband's, like, how much are you putting in there?
And I
Because I would be
relate.
laughing and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
I think, I said, it's edited. It's not, too much. And
Right.
then when I went back and I read the final, I was like, oh, I guess I unedited some of those things. But
But
anyway,
I,
yeah.
I think it's really helpful. I
It's
think that
relatable.
Thank
it
you.
is so
Thank you.
relatable. And what I don't know what was the encouragement you felt, just like, okay, this isn't a taboo. We're going to talk about this. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was nervous at first because I was like, am I doing too much information? And then the more I asked for questions, I mean, you can see so many of the stories are in there. Like there was one woman that said, I felt like sex felt like cut glass. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, me too. Like all of those kind of things, like they're relate, you find those underlying tones and themes, as you
Yeah.
say. And so I thought that was really important to put in there. And I thought it was really important because I felt like if I brush that over, like, and our sex life is great, and we got remarried at 50 and it's perfect. Like, no, it's not. And I needed to be really honest about that. And it's true. Like we were, I was in my, I guess my perimenopause year, so I was still like, yeah, when I met. And then we got married, and then, like right up until like now it's waning a little bit, and our honeymoon, I'm in this like beautiful place. And I'm like, what? So I thought it was really important to do, because it wasn't that there's something wrong with me. It was something my body was changing. That's it. And it wasn't something wrong with my husband. And I didn't love him any less. I love him more than ever. But there was things that, I had to get through and learn and focus on and pay attention to, and not just think that, I'm going to snap my finger and my sex life is going to be great like it was when it was, whatever, 20, 26 years old.
And
Right.
I think
And
that's so relatable for so
right.
many women that, especially in our demographic now, that are still
Yeah.
afraid to talk to their doctor. They're still
Yeah.
afraid to say, I'm having sex urges, or
Yeah.
I have no
Yeah.
libido. So when they hear
Yeah.
you talk about it in this book, they're like, okay, I can bring the book into the doctor and say, here's
Right.
an
They could just open, where did I
example.
leave my libido?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, that's such a great point, though, bringing it into the doctor, because you do have that there and you know what to ask. And you make that point as well in the book that
Thank
these are
you.
some things, these are some solutions. Can you do this for me? If you can't do this for me, like Colleen always says, and
Yeah,
everybody, break up with your doctor. You have,
totally.
yes, yeah, just
It's
have it
totally
there.
right.
If you're
Hmm.
ready to set boundaries in every other aspect of your life during the midlife transition, your health should be first and foremost in setting
It's
those
so true.
boundaries. And now
It's
that
so
there's
true.
so much information, like your documentary, like the book, like some of the physicians' books, they have power in information, and they can go in and
Yeah.
say, listen, doctor this, doctor that, and Tamsen told me, and there's a why, why don't you know this? Or why
Yeah.
are you not willing to help me with my struggle? Like a lot of doctors just, I'm not an advocate for HRT. Like Dr. Malone said when she went to her appointment, and she said, I didn't ask you.
That line, when every time I see the film, and I like laugh out loud with it still, and I've probably seen the film like 6,000 times. But she's right. Like if they're daring ask her that, knowing what she does as an OBGYN, can you imagine what they're doing to the rest of us?
Right.
And so, I wonder, I just wasn't really bold then. I just went to my appointment and got it over with. And I figured they were going to tell me what was ever important. I just was like, oh God, I gotta get this appointment over with. Is everything okay? And I just accepted everything at face value. And now I realize that, I mean, luckily I have a doctor that I feel so comfortable with anyway, that I'm going in there like, and da 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 da. But I want other women to feel like that. So I want this book to like be their permission, to go and you do whatever it is. Like you've got some answers, or at least you've got some questions to ask. Because that's the other thing. I don't have all the answers, but I want them to at least be able to ask some questions. So if there's something in there that helps, evoke something where they can ask a question for themselves, that's really important for me too.
There's so many great things in this book, and you guys are going to have to read it because we don't have time to talk about it
Thank
all
you.
day here. But you also touch on workplace issues. You touch on just what happens beyond menopause, what's going on
Skin, hair.
here, the importance
Yes.
of community, just so much valuable information in this book that
Mm.
you
Thank
guys, you
you.
got to check it out. You
And
got
one of the
to.
things
Thank you.
that we have really been gearing this year on is the conversation post menopause. Now, some people don't like you
I'm so
using the
glad.
term post,
Yeah.
but the reality is the last 5 years, menopause has really had a movement. And I think it is obviously continuing to move. But once you're
Yeah.
past that 366th day, where do we
Now
go?
what?
What do we do? And
Yeah.
I think it's really great that you include kind of writing the happiness curve and talking about postmenopause, because that's something that we need to start addressing as well. So make
Thank you.
sure, guys, you are checking out the book. We'll have the link in the show notes. Tamsen Fadal, How to Menopause, Take Charge of Your Health, Reclaim Your Life, Feel Even Better Than Before. That's a tall order, but I think your book explains how to do that. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.